So my name is Laurel Riley. I'm super excited to be here with you this evening and hearing from Mike O'Shea as he talks about his incredible transfer paintings. I'm here on behalf of the Dance Palace, and we'll be monitoring the chat, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. Today we're gonna do a presentation and then a question and answer session. So you'll be able to ask Mike questions during the question and answer session by either writing through the chat or opening your microphone. So also, if you have questions, burning questions, you can write them in the chat and we'll get to them during the question and answer session. So yeah, with that, I will pass it over to Carlos Porrata from the art committee. He's our art committee chair and our curator this month.
Well, good evening to everybody. My name is Carlos Porrata. I'm the current chair of the Dance Palace Art Committee. The Art Committee provides opportunities for local artists that live or work in West Marin and encourages new artists to exhibit their work in a lobby gallery on a monthly basis. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Dance Palace has been closed for close to a year, and we still don't know how long it will go on. As we're unable to meet in person, the Dance Palace has been moving classes and events online. This decline in income has moved us to rely on donations and has invited us to find other ways for artists to exhibit their work and have artist receptions. The Art Committee has answered this challenge by going virtual. So now let me tell you about the Artist of the Month. Mike O'Shea lives and works near Inverness on the shore of Tomales Bay, and his subject matter is largely inspired by local scenery. Recently, he has returned to aqua tint, etching, photogravure, and transfer painting. Previously, he has been engaged in painting, photography, and bookmaking. He has had solo shows in the Bay Area and in France, as well as participating in group shows. Locally, he has shown in the Dance Palace, First Valley Inverness, and in group shows in Gallery Route 1. His show at the Dance Palace in 2019 was very successful. Mike is recycled from the world of business over 30 years ago. He went back to school to get his master's in fine art from the San Francisco Art Institute, majoring in printmaking. He was attracted to the process aspects of art making and wanted to understand the more arcane methods, such as etching and stone lithography. These are techniques no longer used commercially, but continue to have great fine art potential. He found too that photography aligns well with the types of printmaking. After graduating, Mike and his wife Judy undertook a project in the French countryside, restoring an old water mill into operation. During their 17 years of living half-time in France, they invited art teachers to come to the mill and work in the informal art retreat program. The local artistic community was small but active, allowing the chance for a number of exhibits. While doing a lot of painting, Mike also took with him a 12 by 20-inch banquet camera to make very large photographs and photogravures. His walking and photographing in West Marin provide the source for his artwork. He believes each tree possesses a unique personality. Its presence in the forest allows for it to become a subject for a portrait and to demonstrate its own emotional message. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Mike O'Shea. Mike?
Well, thanks, Carlos and Laura. This is a wonderful privilege to be showing a second time in a reasonably short period at the Dance Palace. And again, to show transfer paintings, which were the subject of my last show. I'm going to put up a bit of a slideshow here and then talk through that. If it works. So as Carlos mentioned, I live on the edge of Tomales Bay, and I've taken to landscape just by being here. It's It's my activity is walking in the woods a great deal, photographing in the woods a great deal, and using my iPhone and essentially gathering images which intrigue me as I go. The subject matter becomes trees in their context, and the interaction between trees and their branches. I become sort of mesmerized by the complexity of the tree forms and the integrity of it, and the way they work in terms of depth of field as well. I've been working in addition to these transfer paintings. I've been working in two other areas of photogravure and aquatint etching. And those are really very intense process-oriented activities requiring a great deal of planning. And as contrasted to that, the transfer paintings are a recreation. They're colorful, they're accidental, they're unpredictable, and so they become what I can do as a break and a relief from the other activities. And so I'm going to run through a set of some of the pieces that are in the show, not all of them. And I'm going to, in the middle, I want to show you a brief outline as to how this process is accomplished, because people wonder, are we looking at a photograph? Are we looking at a painting? What's going on here? This is a small piece. They're all 8.5 by 8.5 or 9.5 by 9.5 if they're square. So they're not very large pieces. And they're all framed in used redwood frames, and they're not put in glass. They're on a rigid board, so they're tough little devils, and they're also varnished, so they're pretty resistant. This particular one is one that I enjoyed, and I was struck by walking up from Pebble Beach on the Johnstone Trail. And the reason I was that these trees were all backlit from the south, and they all had bright crowns on their heads. And so I wanted to reflect how that was happening. And in addition, it was a mixed forest, so it was a lot of different foliage and a lot of different colors. Here's one that is typical of a lot of the work that I've been doing over the years in these kind of paintings, with a strong silhouette of the tree trunks and the foliage, and focusing really on the backgrounds, on the negative spaces between the trees, and working on what colors they reflect and how they interact. So this is one that I've called Blue Seeking Gold. In addition to silhouette types of subject matter, another intriguing set of forms are the roundness of these trees and the moss that they pick up, and the colors. And in this case, the almost reversed negative side of the tree in this area versus the positive aspect of this one. So you can see a sunlit tree here that at first looks like a hole, but it's not. And in doing these, I oftentimes play with the photographs before they're incorporated in the painting in Photoshop, and I can play with the values, play with the textures, play with the emphasis, and try to get an interesting composition. This is similar to the other one in terms of being back along the edges, which gives a better outline. And as you can see, there's a great deal of depth in most of these pictures in terms of trying to replicate the space. Sometimes the foliage gets so complex you can't figure it out, and in the photographs, and this is where playing with a photograph in Photoshop helps. In this case, I've used a kind of a value reversal system, which the traditional photographers call the Sabatier system, named after some guy named Sabatier, I guess. And I think what he found was that if he flashed a negative with a light, like a flashlight, the negative would reverse from its typical black to white, and you could get images with hard black edges with white interiors. So this is a Photoshop version of the Sabatier, which you can do with curve adjustments and such things in the software.
Wow.
So how are these put together? I'm always asked, how do you do these things? Well, it's kind of simple, but it's multi-step. The first thing is to start with a hard board, a good stiff support, and in this case, it's masonite. It could be plywood. It can be fiberboard. Anything that is structurally strong, and you want to make it pretty smooth because I'm going to transfer an image from a photograph. First thing to do is to put gesso on it to give it a white background, and to using sandable gesso, which means that I can put multiple coats and sand between coats and get a really silky smooth surface. I do that by sanding and then drying and sanding and drying. So this takes a day or two to get done. The other aspect of it is the photograph I'm going to use, and this is just the typical kind of photograph I might be intrigued by, and I print that out on a regular laser printer, office printer kind of printer, on cheap copier paper, and I print it to the exact size of the board that I'm going to put it on, and I printed it in the reverse of the way I want it to look in the final picture, because that's going to be put in face down. So before I put the picture on, the photograph on, I underpaint the board with acrylic inks. And the acrylic ink is good because it acts like a watercolor, but it hardens like acrylic paint. So it becomes impervious to water. And this way you'll see in a little bit why. In this case, I kind of keep in mind what the photograph is, and I may think about it when I do my painting, but I don't try to replicate the painting. I'm just trying to create color fields at this point, and a sort of an underlying feature of the painting. I know Kay Bradner is here, and she's a wonderful. Hold on, just.
Susan couldn't get on either.
People are not saying they couldn't get on the link for some reason. I'm getting notes passed to me here, but I don't know what to do about that. So I mentioned Kay Bradner because I've seen a lot from what she can do in underpainting, and she starts with the accidents that the underpainting creates and makes beauty out of them. So it's an interesting part of the process, and it's always accidental, and you never know what's going to come out of it when the image starts to develop on it. So after the acrylic paint is dried, I put down a layer of water-soluble varathane varnish, a kind of a gooey layer so that it's nice and wet and smooth. And immediately I lay on the photograph. So it's going face down onto a layer of wet varnish. In my case, I run it through an etching press that can be rubbed from the back with a rubber, by hand rubbing it, or with rollers. But what I really want to do here is to get the photographic image smoothly adhered to the varnish layer without any bubbles or creases or skips. And I run it through the press, bump, 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 bump. And then I let it dry overnight so that the varnish dries up hard. And then I put it under a tap. And in this case, what I'm going to do is to rub away the paper backing. As you can see, I've been using my thumb and fingers just to rub off the paper slowly. And the photograph essentially is now embedded in the varnish on top of the board. So this is how it comes out when it's done. It's still wet at this point. It just has to dry out. And then after that, I go back after it with a paintbrush using acrylic inks or watercolor or acrylic paints. This can go on quite a long time if I want to. It all depends on the image. So that's how things are done. So a few more of the pieces that are in the show. This is Laird's Landing, which many of you may be familiar with who live out here. And with its magnificent cypress tree next to it. This is theoretically an old Indian cabin, but I think it belonged to Clayton Lewis, who was a wonderful artist who lived there to the end of his life, right on the waterfront. This is another example of one where I'd like to do, which is sort of non-objective in a way, because I'm not working on a big tree or a big profile or a big structure, but just the brush itself and the general nature of the woods, which when you're hiking, you see a lot of this, and I love it. And here I've used a lot of spattering and scrumbling as well on the paint. This one is a bigger one. This is 11 by 11, and it's the pines near the Vedanta retreat, which is down near Olima. And as you drive along the road between Bear Valley headquarters and the Olima intersection, you see them off in profile. And in this case, they needed to be silhouetted by a lot of white painting to leave the trees becoming the subject. I've done this and a mate to it, walking in the Estero Trail, which has a huge forest of way overgrown pine trees, which were put in as probably a commercial pine forest at some point, and they've gotten away. Well, it was bought by the park and left to do what it does. And what it's become is a huge structure full of poison oak. And what we're looking at there are bare poison oak branches, which I didn't realize when I took this photograph, and I suffered the results when I got out of there. But It was taken in the late afternoon, and the colors, I tell you honestly, are just like they look in this transfer painting. This is one that's a larger than the small squares, and it's taken from trees coming down into Heart's Desire park, beach in the park on an early morning when the sun is just coming up from the east. And I was working on the idea of capturing the burst of sun through the trees. So what you don't know is there was a real show of this work. Carlos and I went to the Dance Palace, and we snuck in. We walked in, hung the show, took a picture, and took it down. So this is what it would have been if it were a real show. This is a 360 photo, so the front entrance is on the right and the left, and the back entrance is in the center, and the picture peels the two walls back like kind of an orange peel. But you can get an idea of what the show might have looked like were we live. So that's the end of my slideshow. Thank you. I'll turn you back to Carlos and to Laura.
Thank you. Beautiful. I see some people clapping. Thank you so much for that presentation. And as you've been sharing, there have been a couple comments in the chat that I wanted to share. So Kay said, cool to see the process. And then Linda Marks says, Mike, is this a process you developed, or is this something that others have done and that I just never heard of?
Well, quite honestly, I'm not the only person in the world who's used Verathane as a transfer medium. There are a lot of people have used a lot of different things to transfer images into paintings, and I didn't invent the Verathane. I picked it up somewhere along the line. But the one thing that I think that I haven't seen people doing is the underpainting and the overpainting, which creates a certain depth to the picture that you have to see it in real life to appreciate. It creates a kind of I don't know, it plays with your eyes a little bit, but anybody can do it. I mean, I just gave you a lesson in doing it, and I don't think it would be hard to replicate that. I don't have a patent on it, I guarantee you that.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating, Mike. It really is fascinating. I wonder, like, what influences your choices and colors when you're working with a photograph, and what gets you going when it comes to color choices?
Well, you know, choices of colors in painting. I'm an amateur colorist. There are some colorists on this panel that I will bow to, but you know, I think essentially it's dealing with the feeling of the image itself, and therefore there's a lot of greens and blues and browns because that's sort of what the forest gives me. So I use reds rather lightly, but I've also discovered in playing with the colors is that, like a lot of paintings, you start playing with them, and you play with the complementary colors, and you lay in yellows against purples, and you know, oranges against greens, and so on, and then you begin to get some dynamics in the colors.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I often wonder, like, you know, like I've been watching you do a lot of this natural stuff in terms of photos, but in terms of trees. But have you tried other subject matters at all with this transfer paintings?
Personally, I haven't. I did do a little workshop with my sister, and she liked animals, so we did pelicans and lions, and they worked beautifully, you know. And I think that working with portraits might be a very interesting idea with this, because I think you could get some different results using photographic portraits. But I think any subject matter is a potential for this technique in that sense.
Yeah. And how do you decide what to photograph? I mean, the forest is pretty big, and you're out there, and there's so many different trees and so many different things. What turns you on to a particular tree? What gets you going with that?
Well, that's tough. As I say, every tree's got a personality and some appeal to me. There are some specimen trees hiding out here in the woods that some of us know about and a lot of people don't. Carlos, you're an old ranger, so I'll mention a few you might know about. There was a pine tree above the parking lot in Heart's Desire that was dying and decaying, but it was fighting with it. It was fighting with the world for all of its life, and I took a number of photographs of that, and I did some work in the previous show of that particular tree. It's gone now. It has died and fallen apart. There are specimen trees going down toward Duck Cove. If you take the road down the Duck Cove Road, there's some magnificent logs down there that are just, we don't have a lot of monster live oaks around here like they do in other parts of California, but there are some wonderful trees here. And I keep running into new ones, that picture that I first showed at the beginning of the slideshow is taken out of the front window of the Longstress house, or the Longacres house up in up on just Via Del Mar. So the woods here are fascinating. They really are, I find.
Yeah. I agree.
We do have a question here in the chat from Zia, saying, "Great to see your process. What is the quality of the polyurethane that you find so valuable?"
Well, it has to be water soluble to begin with, which a regular varnish is not. So it's basically the characteristics of a water soluble hard varnish. I think you could work with other solvents as well, perhaps, but it's easy to work with.
Mike, I noticed that all of the pieces are fairly small. Can those be made much bigger? I'm just curious.
Well, there's no theoretical limit to size in this case, other than your ability to adhere the paper to, and you could do it multiple times. There's no reason you can't transfer multiple images, for example, and do double exposures or collages of various images. The limitation I have is the 8.5 by 11 or 8.5 by 14 max size of my printer, but I've been, as I've shown here, I'm doing 9.5 inch images, and what I'm doing is I'm essentially taping two pieces of paper together. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Something kind of that comes to my mind in the situation that we're in right now, and in looking at the forest, and we have so many parts of the forest that are dying, whether it's for the cankers or whatever it is, but we've had so many dying. At some point, will you try to record some of that in your work as some of these dead trees that are? I'm just curious. Because I'm so aware of some of this sadness that I have of this tree. So many of them are dying.
I live in a battlefield of that right here. Our backyard is full of dead tan oaks that are now sticks in the sky, and logs on the forest floor, and they're falling. It's so saddening, and it's the only way I can deal with it without getting emotional, but I go out at night in the moonlight and take pictures of these trees because somehow in the in moonlight they are developing an interesting, you know, battlefield aspect to them. And I've just been collecting these photographs in the last few weeks. I fell and busted up my fingers in the dark the last week doing this.
Goodness.
And but that's my way of dealing with them. I'm trying to hide them in the moonlight, I guess. It's pretty awful where we live. We've taken out dozens and dozens and dozens of trees, you know, and it just never stops.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to take away from the art that you're doing when I brought that up. It's just that it's so in our faces right now. It's so sad anyway.
Well, yeah, it could, you know, ugly landscapes are certainly full of potential, and I know artists who do a good job of it. I guess maybe I'm still in search of beauty.
Sure. Yeah. You bet. You bet. You bet.
We do have a question here about this painting behind you. Wondering if it's yours. Eileen says that it's fantastic. So.
Yeah, that's one of my paintings. That's when we were in France, I had the privilege of having a one-man show in the Department of Aveyron gallery, which is in Rodez. And I'm telling you a shaggy dog story here, I guess. The gallery was originally on top of a Roman ruin, which was on top of a nunnery, and then was also on top of a barracks for soldiers. So it was an archaeological site. And so this was entirely an archaeological art show that I did. And this was a piece, this is one part of a diptych, and it has in it a lot of bones and stones. So I guess I can deal with death and destruction. Carlos, is just that this has to do with dolmens, which are all over the landscape of France, big, huge megaliths, and I enjoyed those.
I just noticed somebody put in the chat about how wonderful your love for beauty, for that search for beauty that you have. That it's remarkable. I love it. I love what you're doing, Mike.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
We do have another question here. I love what you're doing too. Not to cut in just with the questions here. So we have a question here from Charles about materials, asking what's the difference between acrylic ink and paint?
Well, acrylic ink comes in an ink jar. Yeah, I guess it's really probably more, you know, it's liquid, it's thin, but what the actual technology of making acrylic inks versus acrylic paint, I can't tell you other than it doesn't have the body of a typical acrylic paint. And it really acts like watercolor. But it's more strongly pigmented, so you can get some very fine washes, but in deep, strong colors if you want them. So I enjoy playing with acrylic inks a lot. I think they're a great medium.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. And Susan here says ink is more transparent than paint.
Well, some of the inks are not completely transparent, but yeah, you can get more transparency in most of them. But you know, obviously, like the white ink is not transparent, and there are others that are not, the light blues and so on.
Cool.
Yeah.
We have a comment here in the chat saying, Mike, I so enjoyed your paintings and presentation and so glad I could watch it in San Diego where I now live. Thanks so much. Yeah, that is the cool element of doing this online, is we can be here from all over the place.
Yeah. Well, and it's
Carlos.
so interesting.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I was going to say that, it is so, one of the things that I've noticed when we started doing this virtual programs is that it's so interesting that we can actually have an actual good conversation with the artists, where most of the time when you go to a gallery, you're going to see the pieces, but you really don't have that time to be able to actually chat with the artist and be able to actually get the feel of him as an artist, and what makes them tick. And it's just lovely to be able to do that. I'm enjoying these things. I mean, every month we're having one, and it's really a lot of fun.
Well, I'm thrilled to see how many artists I see in this array of people here today. And long distance, we even have Inga Roberts from Whidbey Island, Washington there too. Yes, how wonderful. So, yeah, well, we could probably turn this into an artist roundtable very easily.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if people want to open their mics and ask questions, I do have a couple here in the chat that I want to ask, but just a reminder that people are welcome to ask verbally too if you want. But let me ask another question. Actually, it's a comment. I have a comment and a question here in the chat. So from Sarah. Sarah says, we've watched Mike work for hours to produce one print. He is modest in telling you how much time he spends to tap into his creativity, I think. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. It's cool to hear kind of the back end of this whole creation process.
Well, I think as many of us know, creativity just boils down to hard work after a while, right?
I have to bring up the fact that I was talking with Mike the other day, and at some point, he was bringing up the concept that when you're working with a piece, at some point it takes over and it talks to you, and then you start interacting with it, and it's sort of like it takes its own life, and it's true in many forms of art that occurs. It's an interaction between the artist and the piece, and you don't know exactly what it's going to look like at the end, but it just talks to you. And anyway, I'm just
that's true. It happens in painting, it happens, but I think this particular process, it works so well because I'm laying down a wash of color and then I'm putting down a photograph, and then I can't see it, so I have to get it out under the tap, and it pops up, and I don't know what it's going to look like when it comes out of the sink. And then you start painting it, and then it really does take on its own life. And as was noted, some days I spend days and days on one little 9.5 by 9.5 piece, and the next time I sort of clap my hands and say, well, it's cooked, I don't need to touch this, so but that's the fun part of it. But I think that's true of printmaking in general, because you're running things through presses, you're putting things on copper, or you're putting things on lithograph stones, and you're inking it up, and you just don't know what you're going to get until you peel the paper back, and that's one of the beauties of working in printmaking in general. It's true of photography too, to some degree. Carlos, you're a wonderful wildlife photographer, and you don't always get just what you think you're getting until it comes out of the.
Yeah, until you actually go through once it gets to the computer, you see whether you got what you were seeing or you don't.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get things that you didn't even see when you were taking it. And that's really amazing. But, there was something that I missed, and all of a sudden there was another bird that was in that image, and I hadn't even seen it at that moment. Anyway, it's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it did look like such a magical step, that part where you're washing off the paper,
Right.
where you really are like revealing what's going to
Yeah,
happen
yeah.
next, and you have no idea what it's going to look
Yeah.
like.
Mike,
Uh,
I just wanted,
Here we have a question. Oh, sorry. I don't know who's talking, but go for
yeah.
it.
Carol.
I just wanted to tell you that I think your use of light is so fascinating, the way it compositionally works its way through all the trees. It's just amazing. And I think I've seen a few of these at your house earlier.
Uh-huh.
And when you see them in person, they're even more magnificent.
Yes, well, thank you, Carol. Yeah, well, one of the things about trees is they're all just looking for light, aren't they? I mean, that's what all of this squiggly stuff is doing, is wiggling around to get another few lumens of light, and the result is kind of this spatial competition to fill in the space. And then that's what kind of fascinates me when I look at woods here, particularly because we have a lot of coastal live oaks, and you go down through the state park here, and they've woven this web of branches trying to grab the last bit of light.
Yeah.
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 And it's beautiful. It just becomes beautiful the more you can get through that. And behind it is the light of the sky,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the sun coming through was magnificent.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do something that Laura was doing, and I can't really get over this one. I want to bring it up right away. There's in the chat, Barbara J was actually asking you a question, Mike. It says you said you print on your laser printer, then mention it was an office printer. So is it a standard jet printer or a real laser printer?
It's just the kind of HP printer you buy to print your letters out on. It's what the image really is toner, right? I mean, it's good enough photography. I have to say that it's not fine photography. And I have a very fancy Epson photo printer which prints inkjet, and it's wonderful stuff, but that doesn't do it. It's got to be laser, because that's what adheres to the varnish.
There's more on the chat coming through, Mike. This is a good one. Edward, this is Edward Sardi. Mike, we know you love to hunt for mushrooms. Have you ever considered using this process to feature mushrooms in your art?
I haven't done much with mushrooms in art. I did it at a very early stage, because the structures of mushrooms are so wonderful. And I'm a nut. On Instagram, there's some photographers in there who are doing slime molds that are super miniature. I mean, they're smaller than the lead on your pencil, and they're absolutely gorgeous objects. That they're little jewels that are growing down there in the woods that you should know about. So I'm fascinated by mushrooms, and I'm fascinated by my daughter, Eileen, is also a slime mold photographer. She specializes in. There's a whole world of slime mold photographers out there, by the way, just in case you wonder if they're nuts. But it's true.
Yeah.
And the other comment I might say about mushrooms, Ed, is that it's been a lousy year for mushrooms this year. And I'm really worried about our global warming situation. I think we're running out of humidity, and it's gonna pretty much wreck the mushroom hunting. That plus an awful lot of people have gotten a hold of mushroom hunting lately. So, competition is. is tough.
Yeah.
I got one edible mushroom this winter, one.
Yeah, that's not good. Well, we always count on the beginning of the winter on those good rains that have to come through to be able to get them going. And we didn't really have much rain at all.
Nope. We used to have, we used to have mushroom stuffing for Thanksgiving, and now we just want a little bit of rain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right.
I'm just curious about how we're going to adjust to all that, because that's the reality of what's happening.
Yeah, reducing our use of water.
I mean, it is what it is. And it's fascinating is how we're going to go forward to deal with all of this.
We're going to be inspired by Mike's works and go out and become activists. That's what we're going to do.
Well,
I like that.
Yeah, I wish I had an answer, Blanche. I am quite worried. I was talking to my son-in-law yesterday. We're dependent on the snowpack for California to survive, and we don't even have a snowpack.
So we have to adjust to the reality of what's happening.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's not pretty, and it's not what we would choose.
Right.
And we could say somebody's fault, but it is what it is. And it's a very interesting time of life. If you look back on history, we've had all kinds of things in the biblical times. And so we're experiencing that right now. And I'm just curious as to what's going to happen, because it's out of our control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you think about waterfront in Greenland right now?
What do I think about what?
Waterfront in Greenland.
What? I've got to get my hair.
Waterfront in Greenland.
Waterfronting.
Same thing, right?
Oh,
Right, I was gonna say that
Last
I'm down here and it's like overly humid, so I feel like all the humidities come down to the southern hemisphere or something. I don't know. It's like everything's moving around in different directions.
is that right?
Yeah.
That is going on.
I
But
don't
we're
want to interrupt
experiencing a
the
very-
conversation,
Yeah,
but there
big
was.
change.
Oh, sorry.
We're just experiencing an amazing change all over the world. Not
Absolutely.
just here, but it's all over the world.
Right.
And I don't know how it's going to happen, what's going to come out, and what we should do, but there's a huge change going on right now. And I'm fascinated by how the people are going to learn to adapt to the changes. Because I had a dear friend who lived to be 100, and she went through a lot. And her mantra was adapt and overcome. And I've always remembered that as to, she was, grew up in Germany, Jewish family, blah, 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 went through all of that. And her mantra was adapt and overcome. And
I love it.
that's my
Adapt and
my 2
overcome.
cents worth for all of this.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to Mike's work,
Yes.
how about we talk about how inspiring that is, and others will see in what Mike's shown us today, the opportunities to expand our awareness of what we're seeing.
Exactly.
The way Mike has captured a moment and preserved a moment in the environment. And there's a kind of a feeling of romanticism about the way he's captured the light and the shapes and everything. So it's something to hold on to in a sense, because we don't know how that'll be preserved.
Exactly.
So I think that's a real gift of what you've preserved, Mike. The lights, the color, the shapes. It's a pristine kind of observation of what's still there. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, artists can use their art for many purposes, and a lot use it for political commentary. A lot of people use it as personal commentary. I'm heavily influenced by where I live and what I see, and it's kind of an emotional response to all of that. And so it's really a matter of recording what's I'm surrounded by. And I think living in West Marin, 90% of us are all kind of hit by the same bug here. I mean, we're all doing tree pictures here. I'm sorry, but it's true. and I don't, I used to say, I gotta get away from all of this thing that everybody else is doing here, but I'm really sympathetic with it. It's what we all see and love, and I think a great deal of art can be about that, and celebrating what we see and what we love. There's a parallel show going on at the Gallery Route 1 right now in town here, and I actually have a piece in it. And by the way, it has nothing to do with trees. It has nothing to do with beauty. It's a cyanotype of a container ship, and then a close-up collotype of its hull, and I call it hanging in and hanging out, and it's all about consumerism and trade balances and all the other horrible things that we're doing to ourselves. So I can do that too, and I do that. And this happens to be a show that it's called On the Edge of the Abyss, and it's being run by the Extraction Project, and it's trying to make commentary about how much we take out of the earth, and all the bad things that we're doing to our environment. That started out by a guy named Peter Koch, who came from Butte, Montana, where they have a huge lake of putrid leftovers from the mining days that have gone on for 200 years there now. And he just decided that we've got to say something about this. And he's got hundreds and hundreds of artists doing shows all over the world about extraction right now. And I feel strongly about all of that, and I am participating in these shows as well. What's interesting though is if you go see that show, there's a hell of a lot of tree pictures in there that look just like mine.
Yeah, but I tell you though, Mike, I am inspired. What you have done is amazing, and the word that comes to my mind is that it's so unique. I've seen a lot of different photos or pictures of trees. Your work is very unique. It actually is fascinating. Anyway, I want to thank you for actually preserving that and doing it in that way. It's amazing. Very cool.
Well, thanks, Carlos.
Bravo.
Bravo.
And I just want to say how amazing your family is. To have so much talent in one household just blows me away. It's really great to know you and Judy.
Well, yeah, my wife, I can't keep up with my wife, but she's
You're doing pretty well, Mike.
What a smart guy you are.
yeah, wait till you see her new website. My God. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, you live in paradise. So do we. All of us in West Marin and in this area are so blessed to actually be.
We are.
Well,
Anyway.
So we had one question in the chat that I skipped over, which I wanted to make sure that we got to, from Audrey, asking how would one bid on and purchase one of your beautiful pieces?
Oh yeah, good idea.
An important question. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, one of the reasons, the last show I had at the Dance Palace, I sold 40 pieces of art, which just knocked me out. And one of my artist friends asked me, how the hell did you do that? And I sort of off the top of the cuff said, well, they were small and they were cheap. And
That's true.
We all have too much art on our walls because we all are of a certain age and don't need another painting like the one I have behind me. So, you know, this is the kind of art you can stick behind your bathroom door if you need to find a place for it. But anyway, I'm selling them. You have to contact me because the Dance Palace is not in the business of selling art. And the prices will be, I set them at $175 for anything in the show. Doesn't depend on the size or anything, just a flat rate. So, you know, that they're framed and they're all ready to go. They even have a hook on the back, so you can hang them on a nail.
So
It's ready to go art, you know.
Yeah, to make it,
Well, it's well worth it.
well, to
and
make
how
it
can
easy
we
for
see
Mike.
this? What are the hours that the Dance Palace is open so that we can look at them?
Thank
It
you
You
for
is
asking
can't,
that.
you have to look at the picture.
Oh, at the pictures. Okay, all right.
But there is, I will take this moment as an opportunity to share that there is a virtual gallery up online, and it is, you know, the best you
Okay.
can do from your home to be walking through the gallery. So I have put that link in the chat. If you go there, it's got a beautiful picture of Mike. It's got information about its process, and it's got these pieces and more that you didn't see today. So definitely check it out.
Okay.
It's going to be up
Okay.
for the rest of the month. So yeah.
And just,
There's a link in the chat for it, and I'll also be sending an email out tomorrow to everyone that registered. So you don't need to rush to write it down.
Okay, we'll get the email. And what about the show at GRO? What are the hours for looking at that?
that's open. I forgot. It's open. What are the days that it's open? It's open quite a bit. You'd have to check their hours, but
Okay, I can do that. I'll go look at.
that show is only up until the 8th of May, I think. It's this
Oh, wow.
coming weekend. So it's
Okay,
in its last days, but
right,
it is open for business, and they are showing live.
great.
You can also get onto my website,
Yeah.
mike-o'shea.com. No apostrophe, just Mike O'Shea. And it also shows the transfer paintings. There are 17 of them in the show at the Dance Palace at the moment.
Okay,
And you only saw 10 of them today, so
Okay.
there's more.
okay.
Dancepalace.org.
You're right.
So
Well, it seems like,
yeah, there we go. Go
well,
for
I
it.
was just gonna say, it seems like we're starting to get to the time, that ending time of 6 o'clock. I personally wanna thank you, Mike, for actually allowing us to share your work with everybody. I mean, it's been a real treat. And I really want to thank everybody for actually joining us to share all this time with Mike. In terms of the Dance Palace, I just want to tell you that next month it will be Christine Cordero, and we don't really know exactly what is the date yet, but it'll come up. Stay tuned. Thank you, Mike. I mean, really, this has been a delightful hour with you, and I think we are blessed to have you around in the community. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Carlos. It's been wonderful. I'm enjoying it very much. So,
Bonsoir.
bonsoir.
Any
Oh,
last
À la
words?
prochaine.
Wow.
Before everyone goes, I have just a couple things I want to say. If you can wait for one more minute. I just wanted to say one more time, thank you on behalf of the Dance Palace for coming. We really appreciate donations. If anyone feels inspired to donate to us, we are trying to put on events for free so that people can come and be together in these interesting, turbulent times. And so, yeah, there's the link in the chat. And people were asking also about the recording of this show. If you came in late, we will be posting this on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So you can, you can watch it again, you can share it with friends. I did put it in the chat, but I'm gonna share it again, the link to see our YouTube channel. And yeah, I think that's it. We look forward to seeing everyone next month for Christine Cordero's show. So have a good night. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Carlos.
Well done.
Thank you.
Hello, Mike.
Thank you.